Welcome to the Land Your Bet Sports Betting Show. Looking at Monday Night Football here between the Niners and the Lions, Week 17. One team needs it, one team doesn't. But we've got 4 or 5 best bets and player props in this episode for you. So definitely want to make sure to subscribe to that page so you can continue to follow along all season. Going to be on Monday with the live show, 5:30 p.m. Eastern, as we do always as well. So if you want to get some of those NFL looks in, jump in there on YouTube and Twitter, and we'll take a look at all that stuff for you. But let's go ahead, get right into this matchup, and look at the bets that I've got here for Monday. Kicking it off here with the Lions on offense. Absolutely amazing offense. Number one in terms of the points scored, explosive plays. They don't really even need that much time of possession, but they have had it. It's just they can score in bunches with some really long shots, right? And now we've got no David Montgomery. So granted, there is going to be a little bit less to this offense, especially in the ground game. But the ground game is where you beat this Niners team. It's where they've been worse all season, and it's where they continue to struggle. And it's one of the reasons, not the reason, but it's one of the reasons this team's going to miss out on the playoffs, despite the fact that they still have really good numbers on offense, and their pass defense has been well above average on the season. Third fewest pass yards allowed, but they are 15th in rushing yards allowed, and more importantly, like we said, 28th in the rush EPA, and they're getting no push on their defensive line to get to the runner there, about 27th in adjusted yards before contact. So this Lions rush offense is still going to work. I don't know that you want to take Jahmyr Gibbs at 94 yards or so, even though he is the man to attack in terms of the numbers and what they tell you. There's still the possibility that they don't need him quite as much in this game, and that they will be playing some more of the backups coming out of the backfield who have shown some propensity to get yards. But I think the passing game will be there if they need it, but more importantly, they'll be able to rely on the rush, and that's where they'll dominate this SF defense. On the other side of the ball, like we said, the measurables here for the Niners are very, very good. They're basically a top 10 offense. Any way you want to slice this, the reason that they're not going to make the playoffs is definitely the rush defense in part, some awful timely turnovers, just really costly. And the reason that they've lost roughly 2 to 3 games this season that they definitely should have won. But the offense ain't the problem, and the passing ain't the problem for sure. When Brock has been out there and has had any time against everybody but a couple of squads this year, he's been really, really successful. And I think that'll be the case here. Now, this Lions pass EPA is 9th overall. You can see they're giving up a ton of passing yards because we like the Vikings and other really Ravens, for example, right? Those 3 teams especially are going to be pass funnels with very, very good rush defenses, which is what you see for the Lions here. Now, last week they were very good against a bad Bears offense that's basically given up on the season, but they're going up the previous 2 games then when they played Buffalo and Green Bay, looking at almost 300 yards per game that they're giving up. Over their last 4 games in general, 29th in terms of the amount of passing yards that they're giving up. So this team is very exploitable, and I think it's not just because they've been playing some pretty good pass offenses like the Packers and the Bills. It's also because they're just riddled with injuries at this point. You're also going to see another middle linebacker for them now out for the season. They're going to be in trouble, and they're not really going to be able to get that much pressure on Brock, which they probably wouldn't be able to do anyway because this Niners offensive line much, much better in the pass game than it is in the rush game. If you are following along, you already saw the episode where I put up Brock Purdy to get his pass yards, and I'll just give you that quick reminder that I still think this is good up to about 260. It's probably about 252 and a half right now. All of that's good here. He's at 249 on the season in terms of the passing yards, but you look at him coming up in this matchup against Detroit, he's going to have to throw even more. And he's going to be coming from behind for most of the game. That's what I would expect. This Detroit team, like we mentioned on offense, 33 points per game, that leads the league. Number 1 also in explosive plays. So we're going to see Brock have to get back out there and catch up and get his team on the board. And like I was saying about Detroit, not only have they been pretty bad over the last couple games, in the last 4 especially, 290 passing yards per game that they're allowing to the opponent there. If you look at Brock on the season, 2 bad games. This is kind of what I was referencing. The teams that he's played poorly against, the Rams in a downpour monsoon, essentially on Thursday night in a 12-6 game, and then that blizzard that they played in Buffalo, and he couldn't get to 100 yards in that one. And even Josh Allen had like 150 yards or less in that one passing. So that was not obviously an ample opportunity. This one is. It's going to be pretty clear in the Bay Area there on Monday night. He's going to be playing the Lions defense that has been better at home as well. So really like Brock to get the over here in the pass yards for a 49ers team that it's been a down season, but there's still a little bit of headway to make for Brock to get his contract moving forward. I believe Isaac Guerrero is going to play running back here and is going to be available for the Niners, but I'm just looking at all the passing stuff. I don't think it's much of a surprise to anybody that there's nothing really to feel comfortable with in the run game for SF against the Lions. Not that they're incapable of it, because Kyle could draw some stuff up, but I'm going to be attacking the air, right? And that's what I'm going to be starting with here is Jawan Jennings, because you want wide receivers, and I'm pretty over Debo, and I don't really consider him much of a receiver. And the conversation out here in SF is that he's a bit washed for what they need at the wide receiver position. Let's just put it that way. Jawan Jennings has been the favorite target of Brock Purdy when he's in, and we're going to go back to it. Now, he only had 6 targets last week, 4 receptions, 51 yards. Not a bad game by any means, but not what we need here. It's just Miami's also a much better pass defense versus wide receivers than the Lions. Just complete inverse. They're allowing the 5th fewest yards per game to the wide receiver, as opposed to where they're also bottom 10 versus tight ends. As a result, last week, Kittle saw 8 receptions on 9 targets, 106 yards receiving in the tutty. So Kittle was the man last week. I'm going back to the outside and looking at guys like Jawan Jennings for this game. He still, even last week, almost had 50%, 45% to be exact, of the air yards for this SF team, despite the fact that Kittle had twice as many receiving yards as him. So he had the opportunities. He didn't catch the good throws, to be fair to him, on 2 of those deep balls that would have gotten him over this number. If he had caught, honestly, just one of them for about 25 yards, he would have been up at about 70, 75 yards receiving. 2 of those targets that he missed were high air yards, is what I'm saying here, that would have gotten him there. Detroit, complete opposite of Miami, like we said, 2nd most receiving yards on the season to wide receivers. So while it's not fair to just label their pass defense bad because they're seeing so many pass attempts against them, they're in the top 5 in the amount of pass attempts from the other team against them on the season. But this is still a situation where they're more banged up than they've been. They can't hide behind playing the Bears offense anymore. And I believe that the guys on the outside here, where Brock Purdy's been able to make all those throws, are going to have some success against this Detroit, mostly man defense. I'm actually going to the other wide receiver here, not named Debo, as well for SF. And we're looking at Ricky Pearsall, who Dieter told us about last week, and that hit nicely for us. And we're taking him at 20-plus receiving yards, which he's done twice in a row now. And like I said, I like Purdy versus Detroit, who sucks versus wide receivers, really not that hard. So anybody that you think is going to get volume or involvement in the offense for SF, as I believe is going to be the case for Ricky Pearsall once again, because he's had 4+ targets in 2 games in a row playing with this exact same offense against better defenses, to be honest, against the pass. Even the Rams better than the wide receivers versus the Rams defense versus wide receivers, because this Detroit team, like we said, is giving up a lot there. So I think in those tougher matchups, we still saw him get the volume. If he gets 4 targets in this game, catches 2 of them, definitely like him to average more than 10 yards per reception. Now, I've got a couple leans on Detroit's side. I have no problem with betting on over on Jared Goff, and even Amon-Ra, who's up pretty high, I believe 75, 80, almost 80 yards that he's expected to catch against a bad, we'll call it bad pass defense. It's not the worst, but it's definitely in the last 4 weeks especially, we've seen that defensive pass EPA go up for the 49ers. So I'm really looking at getting the receiving yards for Gibbs here and really not worrying about too much else. And that's something that I think we can bank on. So here's where I'm at, right? 27.5 receiving yards. I understand that this is a defense that is much worse against the run for the 49ers with that 28th ranked run EPA. Totally get that. I just think 93.5 is too high for a guy that might not need to play for that much, right? Like they can't afford to lose Gibbs, especially after losing Montgomery. And we've only got 2 weeks left in the season. The Eagles locked up the 1 seed, I believe, right? So we're good to go there for them. Not too much to play for. So get the early lead and then don't necessarily feel like you have to rush Jahmyr Gibbs when you have a couple backups that can get there for you. Most importantly, though, he is the best receiver for this team out of the backfield, and probably, worth it to call him the 2nd best receiver on this team overall, to be honest, after Amon-Ra. No disrespect to Jameson Williams. But I do think that we're going to continue to see Jahmyr Gibbs be involved the way he has in the last few games, 30-plus receiving yards in 3 straight, yet we still get him under 30 receiving yards as the prop line, which I really like, especially because as good as SF has been limiting receiving yards overall, 2nd best, they are 23rd rather in limiting receiving yards to the running back. So you can come out of the backfield and get some yards against this team in the middle of the field and on the outside in the flat. And that's what I expect him to do with about 3 to 4 receptions in this game, easily getting over the 27.5 receiving yards that we need for him, as opposed to the super, super high rushing total that he would need to get to go over that number. All right, like I said, join the live show, 5:30 p.m. Eastern. That's every weekday. We will be talking about some football here for this game. So definitely bring your bets and jump in the comments. We'll go through all that stuff together. I'll also be back with NBA for Monday, as well as we've got about a 7-8 game slate. So plenty to look at there. We'll stay hot for sure. Now still up about 40 units on the season. So we're looking to keep it going. Hope to see you on the live show. Until I do, happy betting.